Hey, what's up? How you doing? Um, Boy, I'm gonna take a break from going so deep in difficult things that I have to share. Um, and I got a little bit emotional, on that Smith Family Tire and Automotive video. I couldn't finish it because, you know, it's stuff I put in the back of my mind, recently and just hadn't thought about it, and when I open it back up, it's like being there all over again. And particularly when it comes to people who, at one time or the other, I love those people, and so to open that back up, it gets pretty raw for me. Now, let me say this. Um, there are multiple reasons for me telling my story in the fashion that I am. If I just came across me or my site or one of my videos or something like that, and then I went to the YouTube page, for instance, and started watching the videos, they're very convoluted. You got the story, that happened at this period of time in my life. You got this story that happened at this period of time in my life. And then you got this story of what's happening right now, or what happened yesterday, or emotions and feelings and things like that. So it's all over the board. Like I said, for various reasons. Some of the areas I can't go to right now. It hurts too bad. Other stories, I can go there now, but it's still fresh enough that it's hard for me to feel too objective. It's still a personal deal when I go into it. See, when I go back into telling the story, it ain't talking about, the new me, that's really and truly found my home again. I'm like the prodigal son, dude. I'm there, in the vineyard, doing what Daddy did, and Mama, and Granddaddy before, and Granddaddy before, and Granddaddy before, and I can go on and on and on, all the way back to the old country, back before even the colonies here. Storytelling has run in our blood, I guess is what I'm saying, and I never thought that much about it because I was too busy selling, too busy hustling, too busy to really to sit and digest and think. I really didn't even recognize the power that the memory that God blessed me with was. I honestly, I didn't realize it was any different than anybody else, to be honest with you. I knew I was kind of weird, and I didn't think exactly the same way, but, that was just the way it was, And that's where a lot of my opinions come from, was out of a little boy that felt that way, that knew some kind of way. As a matter of fact, I'll be honest with you, I've never told anybody this, man. But I had periods of time, where I thought I was, in those days, it was the only word I knew, I guess, but I thought I was retarded. Because I would see things happen, I would see them, I would hear them, I would be there, and then, when I heard someone tell it, they didn't tell it the way it was, or just a lot of different things like that, and like I said, I thought different, and everybody else seemed to be working out fine, so I had thoughts, man, am I retarded? Hell, I can read and I can write and I can, all this kind of stuff, you know. But here again, I'm talking to you having the abstract mind of a very young boy, you know, really not a toddler, but you know, one that was old enough to think pretty deeply. But I realize now, you know, and with that being said, I started thinking about the great storytellers that I have known, and where that fascination began, you know. But as far back as I can remember, I've been around people that when they told a story, it wasn't just like telling what happened, you know, but it was more they painted a picture for me of what happened. They could tell the story in such a way that somehow, dude, in my imagination, I was there. I was with them, you know. And, you know, for some reason, I loved stories. I told you the story the other night about when we moved up in the second place in Smith Homes housing project over in Greensboro, and I don't know. I think David might have been 8 or 9 or so. I don't know. I can't think right now. I don't even know. But whatever age we were, I was a little thing, and I had been sleeping with Mom and Daddy. You know, the baby did that, and for a long time you slept right there in the bed, and then they put you in this little thing called a bassinet, you know. And my mother was so nurturing that when you outgrew that bassinet, then she had another little, I think it's called a trundle bed, you know, like a little 3/4 size single bed, something similar to that you know, she also kept there. Well, she had my sister Dorcas, and there are 18 months between us. So it was along in that time period that I'm talking about, you know. And I was already in love with people telling me stories, because I told you about my brother David, who we worked together Saturday out there, you know, telling people about the Lord. But David was always a Christian, man. I think he was a Christian when I was born, you know. And I mean, he's serious about. I mean, when I say he was a Christian, it wasn't he just joined the Royal Rangers and went to Sunday school. Oh, nobody. You know, this kid prayed, you know. I mean, I say kid, he was my hero, you know, all that. But he prayed, and he was real serious about it. And I wasn't deep enough with him at that time to know just how serious he was. But I told the story about him. He was outside, and, you know, we shared a room. So Dorcas had come home, and so I had been relegated. I couldn't sleep up there with Mom and Daddy anymore. I liked that warm and cozy, you know. And of course, Mama breastfed, and I'm pretty sure it had a lot to do with it. But here I was back there with David. Well, I didn't like sleeping in a room by myself, and I come and David wasn't in there, and the window was open, the curtains were kind of back, and he was down. I mean, you know, back then it looked like he's 15 foot down, but you know, he's probably he was 5'6", 4, 5, 6 feet off the ground. I leaned out there, and David had a little tent, you know, one little squad, like a Boy Scout tent, and he had it pitched, and he had a cord run through the window, and had him a lamp out there. And I'm sure he was set up, because David was smart, and everything he did, you know, he did it like he was supposed to. And so I hollered out the window, that's something, you know, when you coming to bed? He said, no, I'm sleeping out here. And he said, come out here and sleep with me. And I said, I ain't gonna sleep out there. I want to sleep outside. And I was pretty sure there were wolves and stuff or something, you know, probably. But anyway, David said, no, he said, come sleep with us, I'll read you a story. And I said, what kind of story? Because, you know, I knew David, you know. I already heard Daddy read the Bible and Mama read the Bible almost 24 hours a day, so I didn't want to really hear a whole lot more of that. I already knew it, I thought. And so, uh, David said, I'll read you a story. I said, what kind of story? He said, oh, it's a good story. It's from the Bible. I said, I don't want to hear nothing from the Bible story. I want a real story. You know, or I said, I don't know what I said, real story or whatever. I wanted like a story. You know, that was like work, you know, or something in my little mind. And I said, what's the story about? And David said, it's about Jonah and the whale. Well, I didn't know nothing about no whale. The only whale I knew anything about was up at Della Cofer's up in Lawsonville. They lived up there. They had a farm out there, of course. Their water, they didn't have running water on the inside of the house. And their water, you had to go outside and across probably, I don't know, it's 50 feet, it's probably 12 feet or something. But anyway, a little ways out there in the yard, and there was a round rock, pretty sure, up about 3 foot, a round thing like that. It had a stud on each side, a little roof built over it. It had a thing, a rod with an old oak, I think it was, log on it that had worn down there about smooth, and it had a rope, a nice rope, you know, that had worn thin. But it was still a slick, smooth rope. And it had a galvanized bucket, probably a 2-gallon or so bucket. And they'd let that thing down, and they'd let that puppy down too. And because they held their hand right there to keep that thing from splashing or whatever when it hit the ground, they'd hold it to brace it, you know. Well, from the years of doing it, it was just slicker than a mole's butt, you know. And that was the only whale I knew anything about, you know. So I said, what about a whale in Jonah? And he said, the whale swallowed Jonah. Well, that was new, you know, so I was in. But anyway, that'll give you an idea of how captivated I have been by storytelling since I was a little boy. My dad was quite a storyteller, and you know, when he'd tell me a story, I didn't just hear him tell me a story, but I would see it in my little mind. You know, I just could visualize everything. As a matter of fact, I could go right now to one of the stories he told me. I can see a T-model Ford up on cinder blocks with my daddy with the parts in them in a bucket, because he'd tore it apart thinking he could fix it, but he didn't know how to put it back together. Well, anyway, it's that kind of thing. I heard story after story after story after story after story after story, and I loved it. I loved stories, and I loved them so much that just as soon as I could figure out, learn how to read, man, I remember sitting there looking, boy, I'd look at paper all the way through. I started at the back because that's where the cartoons were. And I'd look at them, I'd look at the pictures, but the words were just like, it was like me looking at Chinese now, or Korean or something. They were figures, you know. Boy, I wanted to read so bad, and I would sit there and stare at them trying to make myself read, you know. But once I did learn to read, then I think it broadened my interest, if you will, in storytelling. And you know, we were brought up old Pentecostal holiness. Well, everything you did was going to send you to hell, including comic books. Oh, that was a straight one-way ticket to the region of the damned, brother. And so, you know, it was kind of it was a little bit tough. But my daddy was a reader, an avid reader, and he was a preacher, and more than just a preacher, he was a student of God's Word. He studied it. He knew the Greek. He knew the Latin. He knew, I could go on, and the meanings. And I don't remember ever asking my dad a question that he did not have the answer to. Bear in mind, Daddy only went to the 3rd grade in school. And because that, you know, when you waste a lot of time when you, like my daddy, you waste a lot of time in school, because you really already know more than they do. Not that you're that much smarter and you're not educated like they are, but if you read a lot, there's almost nothing that they can tell you that you don't already know. So my love and fascination for storytelling started really early, especially in school. Because at school, most of it was a little bit boring. It was boring because there were 4 other brothers and sisters in front of me who had just went through it. We were Pentecostal. We couldn't have a TV. You go to hell, you know. You couldn't have this and that and the other. So what did we do when you did your homework? We all laid around in different configurations and did homework together. Well, you know, if you're a baby, a kid, or whatever, well, you can't watch TV either because you got one. You can't, you know, to fill your mind. But anyway, so just after 3 or 4 times of hearing them, seeing them, and discussing, hearing them discuss doing their homework, you know, it's pretty easy to pick up, you know, and so that made, you know, it made school very boring for me, and it was tough on me now, to be honest with you, because we come straight out of the housing projects, and the Ashboro Street or Martin Luther King Boulevard over there is where we moved from the hospital. Still basic, same situation, you know. And I was used to that kind of life. I mean, I was used to that kind of schooling. You know, I was only white boy in my class in 2nd grade. And I can't say it didn't toughen me up a little bit, you know. And, especially when Rhoda, first time I knew about the birds and the bees, a black girl told me, you know, all about it, you know. And you know, so I lived in a different world from the tradition in my mind, you know, in so many aspects, in so many ways. I lived in a different world, you know. But anyway, I loved literature. I loved reading. Oh my gosh, it was like, you know, I felt almost like I was trapped. You know, I had a big thirst and a big capacity to learn things, man. Learn everything that you could, you know, just I was interested, you know, but there wasn't much, you know, wasn't too much we could do, you know. You really couldn't go out like swimming and stuff like that because it was mixed bathing. Well, the chances of finding a place that was mixed bathing was next to nothing. So, and here again, I'm telling you from my perspective. Looking back, it was a whole different thing from what I imagined, but I'm telling you from the inside of this little creature, you know, and this little boy that was growing up, you know, how I thought. But anyway, I discovered Reader's Digest was the first thing I discovered. And man, my daddy had a thrift store and people donate stuff. They must have been 1,000 of them. I don't even know how many. And National Geographic. It was awesome. I didn't care how old they were. I read everything in our house that I could get my hands on, you know, over a period of time. I even, you know, I had teenage sisters and, you know, I didn't have nothing else to read, and I knew they had some magazines they hid in there under the mattress. And Mom and Dad didn't know nothing about it. And so I got hold of them. Well, Lord God, you know, those were like, I don't even remember, True Confessions, and it was all kind of, you know, stories, boy. And you're talking about broadening my imagination and furthering little Rhoda's education on the birds and bees. Those things were, you know, and I remember all just in my mind. But you know what? It was something to read, and they're pretty on interesting, you know, and so. But I read that, Reader's Digest, Look, Time, anything. My daddy was a news junkie, but we had also lots of them. So I read. I loved it. And that's what we had to do. And I think my sisters, and I don't even know, I didn't pay much attention, but I got into certain things at different time periods in my life. But the first writer that I ever got really hooked on, man, I mean, I had read those westerns, those little westerns that you read when you're a kid, and I had read some Nancy Drew. I read every one of those, and the Hardy Boys, every one of those, and some other in that kind of series. Boy, what I passage, or it's almost like a journey into that memory. It's pretty amazing, you know. But anyway, so during that time, along about that time period, I always liked autobiographies. I didn't really like biographies as much, but I always liked autobiographies if they were written well. I never liked things that were written in the first person. It didn't give me a broad enough view, I didn't feel like, I think is the reason. But anyway, there was a series of westerns and, like I said, Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and, you know, those kind of books. But then one day, I read Huckleberry Finn by Tom Sawyer. Boy, I was hooked. I mean, by, what the heck I said by Tom Sawyer? Huckleberry Finn by whatever his name is. I think of it in a minute. But anyway, I got hooked on this guy, man. And I read everything that he wrote. You know, I mean, everything. It was great. It was great. And so that's kind of the way. And he was a storyteller. Man, Life on the Mississippi and Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. But then there were other books, you know, outside of that. But he just had a certain writing style. And I think part of it had to do with the way he wrote, maintained those, you know, the accents, the Southern accents that I'd grown up around, so that probably played into it too. But anyway, I read that, and over the years, I just really, and then, you know, in like first grade, my teacher would read us something called Jack Tales, and in second grade, I got into Robinson Crusoe because there was a speaking part in the play that we had, and I was the only one that had to do the speaking part. You know, everybody else got to be a tree or a you know, something. You know, there could be something, and it was you know, it really. But I loved the story. I loved the way it was written. You know, which put me reading everything else that he wrote, and. Along with this, after my mother had her 8th child, 7th living child, she had a nervous breakdown, and my dad had to hire some help to come in. It was Viola Tyson, and I don't know, I expect us, don't really know exactly, but around 4 or 5, something like that. When Viola come to work for us, and she worked for us, you know, forever. But she became family to us, and she was there when we woke up in the morning, and she got us ready for school, and she was there when we got home in the afternoons, and then she did our supper. And after she had our supper, then she'd get on the bus, which stopped right out, the Duke Power bus, which stopped right out the front of our house, and then she'd go back over on Garl Street, over off Bimbo Road area, and that's where she lived with her family. And Viola had a big influence on it. She was like another mother to me. And, you know, I hung on her aprons almost, you know. And she's the one that made me go back and wash my hands again. If I come back and she saw something under my nails. And she's the one that made me do this, that, and the other many, many times, you know. In part, I was so close. It was like I said, it was almost like my mama. You know, I guess you'd call it a nanny or something. I don't know. But Viola was quite a storyteller, and she told me lots of stories. And you know what? I'll tell you some of them sometime because they're pretty far out there. And then my granddad was a storyteller, and I remember sitting on his lap. And a lot of people don't really know my granddad. Didn't really know my granddad much because he covered it up with being drunk most of the time, and he was hiding a beautiful mind, to be honest with you. Very smart, you know, just unbelievable. But you know, for the most part, he met the Lord in the last few years of his life. But for the most part, he squandered that beautiful brain, and he was a handsome guy, man, good-looking guy. But he was restless or whatever, and the alcohol. So, but I do remember, man, I remember sitting in my granddaddy's lap, and I must have been sitting across his lap, leaning back, because I remember my granddaddy had a daggone hole right in the middle of his nose, a hole, and he told me, I said, Granddad, why you got that hole in your nose? And he told me the story. He said, a rifle backfired on me. And I said, really? And he told me the story. And the story was, he had a .22 rifle, and he was out in the woods hunting squirrel, because my granddad loved squirrel. He loved squirrel dumplings and squirrel. He's loved squirrel. And of course, if Granddaddy went out there, he's gonna be drinking liquor. And he'd done had 2 or 3 wrecks, and his old hips and bones hurt him. And well, he had that .22 rifle. And so when his leg got to hurt him, he's using that .22 rifle as I said, hell, I said 22. That rifle, it might have been one of them old Springfields or something, but it was a bolt action. But anyway, and he got, I think he got drinking a little bit or something. I don't really know. And son of a gun, he saw a squirrel. So he just threw that rifle straight up. He'd been using it straight up and got a beat on that squirrel. Bam! Well, while he was using that rifle for a crutch, that mud was going up in that barrel. And it stopped that barrel up. So that when that charge went off, that bullet come this way with all the energy of the explosion, and when it hit that mud, it had stopped that barrel up and it couldn't go any further. So the pressure blew back and it blew the bolt action out. I laughed. I shouldn't, but hit Granny in the nose. Boy, I bet it would look like Rudolph for a while, because it left a almost like a BB. Looked like a dang BB in the middle of his nose. Matter of fact, I told him, why don't you put a BB in it, Granddaddy, and make it look better. But anyway, my granddad was a storyteller. And along about that time, just to give you an idea, he told me a story. And bear in mind now, he's sitting there, he loved to tickle on me, but he told me a story. And he said, I said something about the daggone mosquitoes. Granddaddy, mosquitoes? Oh, that ain't no mosquitoes. He said, shoot, I've seen mosquitoes big as pigeons. I said, no, you hadn't. Yes, I did. I sure God did. That's what he said. I sure God did. And I said, tell me about it, Granddaddy. He said, well, I was over at Pomona, which is now Wendover Avenue in Greensboro. So I was over, they had a brick factory over there, and a lot of them brick workers, they had poker games and the liquor houses around over there. And he said, I was over at Pomona playing cards. And they said, we got to drinking liquor, and he said, boy, them mosquitoes were so bad. I started home, and he said, the mosquitoes were so bad. He said, they were so big. He said they were jabbing their beaks. He said I had a jacket on, but they were jabbing their beaks through my jacket, and they were getting the blood out of me that way. And I said, oh no, Granddad, well, what'd you do? And he said, oh, it finally got so bad that he said there was an old boiler over there, laying over there, and he said I was about half drunk anyway, and I didn't want to walk home with all them mosquitoes and feeling like that. He said, so I crawled up in that boiler, and like a steel boiler, and just decided to sleep it off for a little while. And he said he took my claw hammer off. He had a hook thing. Took my claw hammer off and laid over there, and he said I was going to sleep. And he said, them dadgum skeeters, but this time it's so big. He said they were drilling their beak through that boiler. And he said it was coming through the boiler. And he said, I got my claw hammer. And he said, when one of them would come through, he said, I'd bread it down and stick him there where he couldn't go. And I'd bread another one down. He said, finally, I got them all under control. He said, and about the whole boiler was full of them beaks, is what he called them. And he said, you know, I went to sleep, and he said, I slept real good. He said, and the next morning, I woke up, and he said, I crawled out of the border, and he said, don't you know them mosquitoes, he said, had carried that boiler right out here and let me down right here in the front yard. Now, that's as abstract and as crazy as a Dr. Seuss story, but that'll give you some idea of the influence. And that's just a start. I could tell you 100 stories that Granddad told me from, but that's kind of where my fascination with the storytelling side begun. And to bring it fast forward, you know, I've gone through some very traumatic, personally traumatic situations in my life, and some of them almost drove me to complete distraction. And I think when I came through the last situation, it was almost like PTSD, you know. And I learned to not think about those things. I couldn't survive thinking about them. I couldn't mentally stand on my feet if I continued to live in the pain that I had gone through. And so fortunately, with God's help, you know, I was able to do that. You know, so with my storytelling, you know, and you know the memory that God's blessed me with, you know, I can deal with these things one by one. But I have, you know, there's a greater story to tell, you see, and I haven't even scratched the surface on my journey to the culmination of what we're going to see and what experience over the next little while. So really what I'm doing up to this point is just setting the stage, you know, and it's going to be exciting to tell and this, that, and the other, but it's a little bit hard to go through when I tell the emotional stuff. And, you know, as I said, I'm facing, you know, I mean, right now, I've got to just completely peel the onion off of a lot of people I really used to care a lot for, you know, and still to some degree, because they weren't all a part of Brent's, you know, savagery or the fraud or any of that, you know. But I mean, so I still have an emotional attachment. As far as the memory goes, I never see them, any of them. My guy was a good guy, man, preacher guy. Had never heard a word out of him since that day. But I still love him, still think of him, and hope them well. Well, unfortunately, when I finish the story, they too, it rains on the just and the unjust. So the consequences of what Paige did by failing to properly prepare them with the IRS and with Social Security Administration, with Workman's Comp, and with those people. Now, what's going to happen? Yeah, he's going to be held responsible, of course. But also, these people are gonna have to. I'm sure, you know, have to be. I don't even know what to do. Audit them and sort of go through similar situation or what I've had to go through, and I hate it for them. I hate it, you know. But there is no other way, and I have to do it. I don't have any choice. I have to deal with it. Although I've waited since June because it could be fixed, you know. But everybody just have to be willing to just sit down and tell it like it is. We got this problem, you know, and this is what we can do to go ahead and fix it and get rid of it, put it behind and go on and hopefully do well. But up until this point, that's not been possible. So in order for me to get everything straight and to point the Internal Revenue Service away from me, because I wasn't even on the deal. My niece put me on that deal because she needed somebody to sign a check. She told the guy to put me down as manager. This is at Wood Forest Bank. He put me down as member manager. That's the reason I'm fighting IRS today. And that's the reason they took my passport, etc., etc. I'm sure part of that, however, was because I am a staunch conservative, and you know, I was going after and opening up and telling the daggone truth. Well, Hell, I got 19 letters in one day from the IRS. 19 letters. Now, damn it, excuse me, dang it, I can understand, if they want to send you a letter, but boy, I got 19, I opened a couple of them even, but every time I'd look at them, my heart rate would double or something, it wasn't fun, and I didn't do anything, nothing, zilch, zero, not. I had zero culpability, but I have never yet. Oh, I talked to investigators, supervisors, and everybody else, but never yet could I get them to talk to me about why are you even talking to me. I go to the LLC. I've never been on it. I've never been on it. Nothing. None of that. I was not an employee. I was nothing. It was their deal. So that's part of telling all these stories, because we'll take this story and this story and this story, and maybe this one happened 10 years ago and this one happened yesterday, and this. We'll put them all together in chronological order. And right now, my friend is working, my little friend over in the Philippines, is working on writing, putting them into words and editing it. And eventually all of these things will be a book. And the culmination of which hadn't really happened yet. It's fixing to. So that tells you, well, I'm a storyteller, and I enjoy, I was pretty down from telling the stories and got talking about Jim and the story there, and it's a deep story. I hadn't even got into the real deal there yet, but it opens that up, and I can't stay there but so long without having to take a break. It's great to be able to come out, tell a story, tell a story, and I'm reliving it, something that made me laugh, and shoot, I got something that make me laugh better than that, better, more than that, so I do it for me. I do it to lighten the spirit, and scriptures tell us that a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. So thank God that although I go down these daggone rabbit holes and tunnels in the annals of my mind to remember a story and bring it, and yeah, man, I go through the same feelings, the same pain, the same hurt, not the same physical pain, thank God, but emotional, and you feel it. So it takes me a minute, to get back to the kingdom, I guess. It's the only way I know how to say it. Get back to who I am now. And part of that is to be able to tell something that's funny and to laugh and feel happy and get out of that gloom and doom and crap and despair that I lived in all those years. Those characters, none of them had anything for me, any meaningful, lasting. So I got a lot of attaboys and I got a lot of BS. But when the rubber hits the road, brother, you might as well understand you got friends as long as you can offer them something. That's all. Every once in a while you have a Danny or a Rod or somebody like that. And I hate to start calling names, but right now, I got Danny, and friends, extended friends, who would absolutely be Danny if they lived closer. I'm pretty certain. But I'm to the point too that I can tell the story without coloring it, because up until now I couldn't. I had dear friends and people that maybe it was embarrassing that or just didn't want to tell it, didn't want the way it was, and I just let things stand as they were told. Well, the time has come, for me to present my side of the case, so to speak, or to tell the details exactly as they happened from my own eyes. And fortunately, I have the kind of memory that allows me to do that. And never talked a lot about it, but it sure helped me in my business. And that was a gift from God. So I'm thankful for it. And I screwed it up, but I'm thankful He fixed it and made me better than I was before I screwed it up. So everything's all right. So that's another little disclaimer, and thank you for listening. And I love you. All love you. See you later.